It's funny how life can surprise you, even after you think you've seen it all. The thing I never expected, though, was for a simple gesture of kindness to unravel everything I thought I understood about family. It was a chilly evening when my new stepdaughter, Mia, stepped through the front door. She was only 15, still delicate around the edges, unsure of where she belonged after her father passed. My husband, Tom, had been the love of my life, but I knew his death had left a hole in her heart, one I could never fill. That's why I invited her to live with us, to give her a home, a sense of stability, to show her that she wasn't alone. I wanted her to know she had family, that she was still loved, even if it wasn't quite the same as it once had been. That first evening, she walked in quietly, hugging her things to her chest like a little girl coming home after a long day at school. I tried to make the atmosphere light, to put her at ease, but there was a heaviness between us. The house, usually full of the clattering sounds of my husband's old jokes, felt hollow without him. I smiled at her and placed a bowl of soup in front of her. I hope this helps. It's the same recipe I made when Tom and I first moved in together, I said, my voice soft and steady. Her eyes flickered with a quick sadness, but she didn't say anything. We ate in silence. Days passed like that, slow and steady, until something changed in her. She wasn't the withdrawn girl anymore. She was becoming more engaged, more lively, like she was finally settling in. She would laugh at my silly attempts to make her smile, sit with me on the couch while I watched old movies I knew she'd never care for. I could tell she was warming up to the idea of this new life with me. But one afternoon, things took a turn. I found myself cleaning out the linen closet when I overheard a conversation that made my heart stop. Mia was on the phone in her room. Her voice was quieter than usual, as though she didn't want to be overheard, but the words were sharp, a knife slicing through the calm that had once been our home. I told you, I can't just tell her. It's complicated. You know how she feels about you, she whispered. There was a pause, and I could hear a man's voice, but it was too muffled to make out what he said. The silence stretched on. Then, Mia's voice again, low and steady. I'll come over tonight. I just need more time. The words hit me like a cold wave. I didn't understand. Who was she talking to, and why did she sound so secretive? It was as if the girl I had been bonding with was suddenly someone else, a stranger with secrets I couldn't access. I tried to push the thought away, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe it was a friend. But something deep in my chest told me that wasn't the case. It was only the beginning of a discovery that would shake everything I thought I knew about my new family. The days that followed felt heavier, as though the air itself was thicker with tension. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but Mia was acting normal again, or at least what I had come to think of as normal. We would sit at the dinner table, and I'd watch her, trying to read her, to find any clue that might explain what I had overheard. But she was so good at hiding whatever it was. She ate her food, smiled when I spoke to her, and nodded at the right moments, as though everything was fine. But deep inside, I felt the knot tightening in my stomach, a feeling of unease that wouldn't let go. I remember one evening, when the two of us were watching an old black and white movie, just like Tom and I used to. Mia was curled up beside me, and for a moment, I could almost forget the whisper of secrets lingering in the air. I thought to myself that maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was just adjusting, and I was overthinking it. But then, when she leaned her head against my shoulder, I smelled a familiar cologne in her hair, one I had noticed on Tom's best friend, Jerry. Jerry had been a constant in our lives, a steady presence, like an old photograph stuck in time. After Tom's death, he had visited a few times to check on Mia, always with that same warm smile and that cologne that smelled like deep woods and leather. Jerry was close to both of us, too close maybe. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could think about was that conversation I had overheard and the lingering scent of Jerry's cologne in Mia's hair. My heart hammered against my chest. Something wasn't right. I had to find out what was going on, even if it meant confronting Mia, even if it meant risking the fragile bond we'd built over the past few weeks. The next morning, I waited until she was in her room, then I went to her closet. I hadn't meant to snoop. Really, I hadn't. But the sense of something hidden, something buried deep, pulled me there like a magnet. I rifled through the clothes, and that's when I found it. An envelope tucked carefully behind the sleeve of a jacket. It was plain, unmarked, but the weight of it in my hands felt like 1,000 pounds. I opened it slowly, my heart racing in my chest. Inside, there was a letter folded neatly, and as soon as I read the first line, my world seemed to collapse. It was a letter from Jerry. In the letter, he spoke of plans to marry Mia. He called her his beloved, and in those words, I could feel my stomach churn. He was talking about my stepdaughter, the daughter of my late husband, as if she were already his. Tears welled up in my eyes as the anger, confusion, and betrayal swirled in my chest. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, the gut-wrenching realization that the man I had once trusted, the man who had stood by Tom for so many years, was now the one trying to steal something precious from me. I could hear Mia's voice down the hall, laughing at something on her phone. But in that moment, I didn't feel like a mother anymore. I felt like an outsider, someone who had been played for a fool I wasn't sure what to do next. I knew this was something I couldn't ignore, but what would confronting her do? Would it tear our fragile family apart? I sat there in the quiet of her room, holding the letter in my hands, and for the first time since Tom's passing, I felt utterly, painfully alone. The days blurred together after I found that letter. I walked around the house, a ghost in my own life, unable to think clearly. Every corner, every piece of furniture, every small detail in the house reminded me of what I had lost. Not just Tom, but now the trust I had put into Jerry, into Mia, into this new life I was trying to build. The letter burned a hole in my mind. I knew I had to confront Mia, but every time I thought about it, I froze. I had promised myself, when Tom died, that I would be the strong one, that I would hold our family together. But now, everything felt shattered, like I was holding pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit anymore. I waited for the right moment, or maybe I was just too scared to face the truth. Days passed, and I kept pretending that things were normal. But in the quiet moments, when Mia was out with friends or in her room, I would sit in the living room, feeling the weight of my betrayal like a stone in my chest. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. Mia came home early from school. Her eyes were bright, but there was something in the way she held herself, the way she walked into the house like she had a secret she wasn't telling. She smiled at me, that familiar, sweet smile she had used so many times before. But this time, it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, how was your day?" I asked, my voice sounding too bright, too normal. "It was fine," she replied, a little too quickly. She paused at the door, then added, "I've been thinking a lot, about everything, about us." I stopped what I was doing. There it was again, that feeling that something wasn't right. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. "We're doing okay, aren't we?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Yeah, we are," she said, but her eyes shifted to the floor, and I could see the hesitation in her. It's just, I didn't want to keep this from you, but I knew. I already knew. I could feel it in my bones, the truth creeping its way into the space between us. "What is it, Mia?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her shoulders slumped, as if the weight of whatever was on her mind had become too much to bear. She walked over to the couch and sat down, her hands wringing in her lap. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the pain. "I'm getting married," she said, her voice soft but firm. The words hit me like a slap. I felt my chest tighten and my breath caught in my throat. I had already known it, but hearing her say it aloud made everything feel like it was happening in slow motion. "I didn't want to tell you like this," she continued, her voice wavering now, "but I'm getting married to Jerry." There it was, the truth laid bare before me, as raw as it could be. Jerry, my late husband's best friend, the man who had promised me he'd take care of Mia, was now the man who had taken her heart. And worse, he had kept it a secret from me. He had betrayed not just me, but my husband's memory. My mind raced, and I wanted to shout, to scream, to demand why, but all that came out was a small, broken sound, a sob I couldn't control. "How could you?" I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "I didn't know how to tell you," Mia replied, her voice small now, like a child's. "I love him, Auntie May. I've always loved him. He's the one I want to be with." The room felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in around me. My head spun. How had I missed this? How had I allowed Jerry to weave himself into our lives like this, to tear apart the trust I had tried so hard to build? I wanted to feel angry, but all I felt was an overwhelming sadness, a deep ache in my chest. This was my family, and now it felt like a lie. "Do you love me?" I asked her, my voice breaking. "Of course, Auntie May," she said quickly. "I do, but I love him too. I never meant to hurt you." I stood up, not knowing what to do, how to move forward. I wanted to tell her that she was wrong, that this wasn't how it was supposed to be, but all I could do was walk out of the room, leave her sitting there with the weight of her confession between us. As I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door to her room, I realized something. This wasn't just about betrayal. It wasn't about Jerry or even Mia. It was about me, my own trust in the people I loved, in the family I was trying to rebuild. But I wasn't going to let it break me. Not again. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at the door, my mind racing, trying to piece together everything that had just been thrown at me. It was as though the ground beneath me had shifted, and I was left grasping for something solid to hold on to. The quiet of the house felt suffocating, the weight of Mia's confession pressing in from all sides. I could hear her moving around in her room, the soft shuffle of footsteps, the creak of the floorboards. And yet, despite the fact that she was so close, it felt as though she were miles away, locked in a world I couldn't touch. I took a slow breath and tried to compose myself. I wasn't the kind of person to fall apart. Not anymore. I had learned how to deal with loss, with heartache, with betrayal. I had picked up the pieces of my life after Tom passed away, and I would do it again. But this felt different. This felt like a wound I didn't know how to heal. I knew I couldn't just sit there, lost in my thoughts. I had to act. I had to make a decision. But what was the right decision? Could I really expose Jerry for what he had done? Should I confront him, demand answers, rip apart the facade he had built? Or did I protect Mia, try to shield her from the consequences of her actions, even though she had already chosen a path that hurt me in ways I never expected? I walked into the kitchen, my steps slow, deliberate. the smell of the old wood in the house, the faint scent of the stew I had left simmering on the stove. It all felt so ordinary, so out of place for the turmoil in my heart. I turned on the faucet, letting the cool water run over my hands, the sensation grounding me in the present. I needed clarity. I needed a moment to breathe. And then the phone rang. The sound broke through the silence like a sharp crack, and I jumped, startled. I glanced at the screen. It was Jerry's name. I froze. My mind flashed back to the letter I had found, the one he had written to Mia, the betrayal, the lies. But despite the anger that simmered in my veins, part of me, that foolish part, wondered if maybe this call would offer some explanation. Maybe he would say it was all a mistake, that Mia had misunderstood, that he had only acted in a moment of weakness. But deep down, I knew better. I let the phone ring until it went to voicemail, and just like that, I made my decision. I wouldn't confront Jerry just yet, not in the way I had planned, not with all the raw emotion flooding through me. No, I needed to be smart. I needed to have control of this situation before I let the anger take over. Mia was in the living room now, sitting on the couch with her phone in her hands, her eyes lost in the screen. Her posture was tense, her shoulders pulled up as if she were bracing for something. I took a deep breath and walked over to her. "Mia," I said quietly, "we need to talk." Her head snapped up, her face pale, her lips trembling as she met my eyes. She knew this wasn't just about the wedding anymore. She knew this was bigger than her secret. I sat down beside her, and for the first time in days, I felt the weight of everything settle between us. "I'm not going to pretend this is okay," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You've broken my trust, Mia, and it's going to take a lot for me to rebuild that." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears, and I could see the guilt in her face. But I couldn't let her off the hook, not just yet. "I'm going to talk to Jerry," I told her. "I'm going to hear what he has to say." She swallowed hard, her eyes wide with fear. "Auntie May, please don't. It's not what you think." I shook my head gently. "It's exactly what I think, and I need to hear it from him." For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The room felt heavy with everything left unsaid, and I could see the weight of this moment bearing down on Mia, too. She was just a girl, so lost in love, in the moment, that she hadn't realized the damage she had done, but I wasn't going to protect her from the truth. I couldn't. "We'll figure this out," I said quietly, standing up. "But you and we're going to have to face this together." And for the first time, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as lost as I thought she was. The next few days were a blur. I kept my distance from Mia, giving her space, but I could feel her eyes on me whenever we passed each other in the house. There was an awkwardness in the air, a tension that wasn't there before. It was as though everything we'd built was now fragile, teetering on the edge, and neither of us knew how to fix it. I spent hours in the kitchen, mostly alone, stirring pots that didn't need stirring, trying to fill the silence with something, anything, that could drown out the noise in my head. But nothing worked. The anger, the betrayal, the confusion, it all swirled inside me, and no matter how hard I tried to push it away, it lingered, like an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. Mia stayed locked in her room most of the time, and I didn't force her to come out. I didn't need to. The truth was already hanging between us, thick and undeniable. She knew what she had done. And I knew deep down that part of me had failed her. I had failed to see the signs, failed to protect her from making this mistake. But I couldn't let myself fall into that trap of guilt. I couldn't change what had already happened. What mattered now was what came next. The phone call came that afternoon. Jerry. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the screen, my finger hovering over the green button. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room, to erase his voice from my life completely. But another part of me, the part that still wanted answers, still wanted some kind of closure, pushed me to answer. I took a deep breath and pressed the button. May. Jerry's voice came through, smooth, familiar, and yet somehow foreign now. We need to talk. We do, I replied, my voice steady. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of hearing how much his betrayal had shaken me. Where are you? I'll be there in an hour, he said. I know you're upset, and I can explain. Save it, I interrupted, my words sharp. Just come, and don't lie to me when you get here. I ended the call before he could say anything else. My heart was racing in my chest, and my hands were shaking slightly. But I didn't let it show. I walked into the living room, where Mia was sitting, staring at her phone, her fingers tracing the screen as though it held all the answers. Mia, I said, my voice softer this time. He's coming. Jerry, we're going to talk. She looked up at me, her face pale, the weight of her guilt pressing down on her shoulders. Auntie May, please, don't do this. I knelt in front of her, trying to meet her eyes. I have to, sweetie. I have to hear it from him. You can't hide from the truth. She swallowed hard, her lower lip trembling. I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant to. But I love him, Auntie May. I thought you'd understand. And in that moment, I saw how young she still was, how caught up she had gotten in this whirlwind of emotion and secrets. She was doing the best she could, but she had made a choice that was going to change everything. I know, Mia, I said quietly. I know. But love is about trust, and right now, you've broken mine. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I'm so sorry. The doorbell rang then, a sharp sound that seemed to echo in the silence of the house. I stood up, my heart pounding, and made my way to the door. When I opened it, there he was, Jerry, standing on the porch with that same smile, that same charm. But this time, I didn't see the friend, the confidant. I saw the man who had lied to me, who had betrayed my trust. Jerry, I said, my voice cold. Come in. He stepped inside, his hands shoved in his pockets, his posture defensive. He looked at me, then at Mia, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. But it didn't matter anymore. He had crossed a line. I didn't want it to happen like this, he said, his voice low. Then why did it? I asked, my patience running thin. Why didn't you tell me, Jerry? Why keep it a secret? He opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come right away. Instead, he seemed to gather himself, taking a deep breath before finally speaking. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you, May. I crossed my arms, staring at him. You didn't think this would hurt me? He lowered his gaze, and for a moment I saw the guilt in his eyes, but it was too little, too late. I'm sorry, he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. I never meant to hurt you, but I love her, May. I love her more than anything. Mia stood behind me now, and I could see her trembling. She was caught between us, torn between the man she loved and the woman who had opened her home and heart to her. I could see the pain in her face, the regret. And for the first time, I wondered if she truly understood the consequences of her actions. I know, I said softly. But love doesn't come with a free pass to break hearts, Jerry. I turned away, my eyes brimming with tears. I refused to shed in front of them. I needed to keep my strength, to hold it together for both of us. Don't make me choose between you two, I said, my voice steady but broken. I won't. This has to stop now. Both of you need to figure out where you go from here. As I left the room, I realized that this wasn't just about Jerry or Mia anymore. This was about me, about reclaiming my dignity, my family, and my peace of mind. I spent the night alone in my room, staring out the window, watching the soft glow of the streetlights filter through the curtains. The quiet was unbearable, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged inside me earlier that evening. I could still feel the heat of the confrontation with Jerry, still hear his words echoing in my head. I love her more than anything. His voice had trembled, but the weight of his confession didn't feel like a release. It felt like a further betrayal. I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I thought I had seen it all in the years I'd been with Tom, through the ups and downs, the joy and the heartache. But this was something different. It wasn't just the man I had trusted with my heart. It was the girl I had promised to protect, to love as my own. And now she was in the middle of this mess, torn between loyalty and love, between what was right and what she wanted. The house felt hollow without any noise, like it was waiting for something to happen. I could hear the creak of the floorboards upstairs as Mia walked from one room to the next. She hadn't said much after Jerry left. She had stayed quiet, lost in her thoughts, as though trying to figure out what to do with the weight of her choices, and I could feel her guilt, thick and suffocating, like it was choking her every breath. I couldn't just sit here, letting her carry that weight alone. She needed me now, more than ever. I knew I couldn't change what had happened, but I could help her face it. She needed guidance, and I wasn't going to abandon her. Not like this. I stood up, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet as I walked down the hallway. My hand hovered over the doorknob to Mia's room, but I hesitated for just a moment. I wasn't sure if I was ready for the conversation that awaited. But the truth was, I didn't have any choice. We needed to talk. I knocked softly. Mia? She didn't answer right away, but I could hear her shift inside, the faint rustling of fabric. Finally, she spoke. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I opened the door slowly, stepping into the room. The dim light from the desk lamp bathed her face in soft shadows, and I could see how exhausted she looked, as though the weight of everything had drained her. She was sitting on the bed, her knees pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around them. Mia, I said softly, sitting down beside her. I didn't reach for her hand. I didn't want to crowd her, but I couldn't just leave her in silence. We need to talk about what happened tonight, about everything. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said, her voice breaking. She wiped her eyes quickly, but the tears kept coming. I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you. I know you didn't, I said, my voice calm but firm. But you've hurt me, Mia, and I need you to understand why this isn't just about what happened between you and Jerry. This is about trust. It's about respect for the family we're trying to build together. You've got to think about the choices you're making and the consequences they carry. She nodded, her tears falling freely now, and I felt a pang of guilt in my chest. I didn't want to make her feel like she was alone in this, but I also couldn't just ignore the damage that had been done. I wasn't doing her any favors by pretending everything was fine. I never thought about it like that, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted to be happy, and I didn't want to lose him. You don't have to lose anyone, Mia, but you do need to understand that love doesn't come at the cost of the people who care about you. It doesn't come at the cost of trust. I don't know what's going to happen with you and Jerry. That's something you'll have to figure out on your own. But I do know this. You've got to rebuild the trust we had. We're family, and that means we're in this together." She looked at me then, her eyes filled with both sorrow and relief. She didn't say anything for a while, but I could see the wheels turning in her head, the weight of everything sinking in. And for the first time in days, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I'll make it right," she whispered, almost to herself. "I promise." I nodded, squeezing her shoulder gently. "I know you will." I stood up to leave, my mind still reeling, but a strange sense of peace washed over me. The storm wasn't over yet. We still had a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild. As I left the room, I didn't know what the future would hold for Mia or for Jerry, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let betrayal define me. I was going to take control of my own life again, rebuild what had been broken, and protect the family that was still mine. The days after that conversation felt different. I don't know if it was the weight of the truth settling between us or if it was just the calm before another storm, but everything seemed quieter. Mia had been trying, truly trying, to show me that she was remorseful, that she understood the magnitude of her choices. She spent more time at home, helping around the house, taking on small tasks to prove she wasn't trying to escape the consequences. But there was still a silence between us, a lingering uncertainty that neither of us knew how to erase. Jerry, for his part, had been distant. I hadn't heard from him since that night, and part of me felt relieved. I didn't know what to do with him anymore. I didn't know if I could ever trust him again. And Mia, though she said she loved him, had retreated inward, as if uncertain about how to proceed with someone who had betrayed not just me, but the very family we had tried to create together. I found myself thinking a lot about trust, what it meant to give it, and what it meant to lose it. It wasn't something you could easily rebuild. Not once it had been shattered like that. But I didn't want to spend my life angry, locked in the past. I had to move forward, for my own sake, for Mia's sake. One afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea in my hands, I heard the familiar sound of the doorbell. My first instinct was to stiffen, to prepare myself for whatever confrontation was coming. But this time, when I opened the door, it wasn't Jerry. It was Mia, standing there with a hesitant look on her face, holding an envelope. I raised an eyebrow, stepping back to let her in. "What's this?" She handed me the envelope, her eyes searching mine for something, anything, maybe for a sign that things could still be repaired. "I wrote a letter," she said quietly. "To Jerry, to you, to myself." I took the envelope, unsure of what I was about to read, but knowing that whatever it was, it had to be something that came from her heart. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling slightly, as I pulled out the paper. The words on the page were simple, but they hit me harder than I expected. "Dear Auntie May, I'm so sorry for everything I've done. I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I wasn't thinking about you, or how much I was hurting you by keeping secrets. You've always been there for me, and I've let you down. I can't fix the past, but I can try to make things right moving forward. I hope you can forgive me someday. I love you. Always." Her words were a raw, vulnerable admission of guilt, and as I read them, I felt the anger I had been holding on to for so long begin to dissolve. It wasn't gone, not completely, but it was softened. She wasn't just apologizing to me. She was apologizing to herself, to the girl she had become, and to the life she had almost ruined. I looked up from the letter, meeting her gaze. She was standing there waiting for my response, her hands clasped tightly together. "I'm not going to lie to you, Mia," I said softly, my voice breaking. "This is hard. This isn't something that just goes away. But I see you. I see that you're trying to make things right, and that's a step in the right direction." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded, wiping them away quickly. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I wanted you to know that I'm going to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." I stepped forward, pulling her into a tight hug. "You've got a long road ahead, sweetie," I whispered. "But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." We stood there for a moment, holding each other, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of peace in my heart. We were still broken, still fractured, but maybe, just maybe, we could start rebuilding. As I watched Mia walk out the door later that evening, I realized something. Family isn't always about the people you're born into. It's about the people you choose to stand by, even when they've hurt you. It's about giving second chances, not because they're deserved, but because sometimes that's the only way to move forward. In the end, the lesson wasn't just about trust. It was about resilience, about finding strength, even when everything seemed impossible. It was about not letting betrayal define me, but allowing it to refine me. Would I ever fully trust again? I didn't know, but I knew one thing. I was learning to forgive, and that in itself was enough. We all face moments of betrayal in our lives. Sometimes it's the people we love the most who hurt us, but forgiveness is a journey, and though it may take time, it's one worth walking. Have you ever had to forgive someone who broke your trust? How did you find the strength to move forward? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this, where family, love, and trust are tested in ways we never saw coming.